Hello, everyone. This is Sarah Hutchinson, and I am recording my presentation for my summary report of Orem self-care and deficit theory for Nursing 510. So first, I chose the self-care deficit theory by Orem, which was initially published in 1971. The description is a communication between each other and our environment is critical to life and the ability to function. And this is defined as a grand theory, so it's an abstract theory which attempts to explain aspects of human experience. The first premise of this theory is intrinsic human desire to fulfill self-care requisites autonomously, which translates to there is a intrinsic need to fulfill our needs independently on our own. And then the second premise is that we have the potential to develop this self-care agency, which can be nurtured and developed. The actual theory is three interconnected theories regarding self-care deficit, which involves patients who are not able to meet all of their needs, and then the nursing systems that encompass both of those things. Some criticisms of this theory think that it's too complex and it's too difficult to put into practice, which we'll talk about on our final slide. So definition of some of these concepts. Nursing is an art form that allows the nurse to give assistance to another human being in order to meet their self-care needs. Human beings are men, women, and children who are cared for either separately or as social units. Environment is the physical, chemical, and biological entities in which human beings live. And health is being functionally or structurally whole. And you'll notice that this involves all four concepts of the nursing meta paradigm. Finally, self-care is deliberate action to supply materials necessary for life and health. This theory has been reworked several times over the years and republished, most recently in 2001 before Orem's death in 2007. So there are other concepts that we won't go into full detail here, but if you would like to go into that in more detail, it is on page 149 of our textbook, McEwen and Wills. Relationships between all of these concepts. So this is kind of where a lot of people struggle with the complexity. So essentially, deliberate input is needed to sustain life and health, which input is action. So deliberate actions are needed to sustain our life and our health. And human agency is the ability to discover and develop ways to make these actions better and to provide them for ourselves and for others. And human beings experience difficulties as hardship in the care mostly of ourselves or of others. And this is kind of the essence of self-care. And then the responsibility of providing care for those experiencing these hardships is a shared responsibility, and that's kind of where nursing comes in. Finally, again, the critical premise is communication and interrelationships between themselves and our environment. Again, a model of these self-care theories are found on page 148 of that same textbook of McEwen and Wills, which essentially maps out these theories, which involve self-care as the smallest circle, self-care deficit as the circle around that, and then the nursing systems that encompass both of those things as the final circle. So the outcome of this theory reiterates nursing is a practical and legitimate science. So the nurse-patient relationship is defined as conditions where the need for nursing specifically is established and is separate from medical needs. It's also considered a model for constructing a nursing system that can be translated into real-life applications, though some people struggle with this. And finally, hospitals and schools of nursing often use Orem's theory as the basis for curricula, and then it is used to develop protocols for nursing care in some hospital systems. All right, so finally, the summary of the research study, the study that I chose titled Examining Self-Care Behaviors and Their Associated Factors Among Adolescent Girls with Dysmenorrhea, an application of Orem's self-care deficit theory. It was published in 2015. It was conducted in Hong Kong And it involved a study of 531 girls in secondary school. It was a descriptive and qualitative study. So it used this adolescent dysmenorrheic self-care scale that asked the girls to rate themselves on a point scale, 1 through 6, with higher scores reflecting higher level of self-care behavior. So it identified patient and environmental factors that influence their ability to perform self-care for themselves. Although some factors were non-modifiable, modifiable risk factors can be utilized in clinical practice. And it provides the foundation for future research and applications. So the researchers identified Orem's theory as that the patient must acquire agency for self-care, which is influenced by basic conditioning factors, which they defined as age, education, socioeconomic factors, those sorts of things. And then this study actually identified a positive relationship between self-care agency and self-care behaviors. So it did support this self-care theory, Orem's theory. And it could be used to identify girls that were at risk for lack of self-care agency. However, more quantitative research is needed to identify like an actual tool to identify those girls. And then they identified the study as that it could be used as a theoretical model to guide future research. Finally, these are my references that I used for this presentation. Thank you for watching.